Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Hector Del Castillo. I'm Chief Product Officer at Bold PM. That is my own consulting firm. And the topic that I'm going to be discussing today is how to boost the resilience of your digital product strategy. And very similar to Ryan's previous discussion, I'll be focusing specifically on the strategy for digital products and define even what digital products are. Before I start, I want to actually give a shout out to all the organizers and also all the sponsors for ProductTank Austin, and also Podcast Village, who actually is my partner in producing when I record content from talks like this. They produce great podcasts as well as video from anything that I've done for the last few years. If you're on Twitter, you can use the particular hashtags digital and product strategy. And you can use the ProductTank Twitter handle, PTATX, and then my own, HM Del Castillo, to share anything that you want to share from today's discussion. And also, if you want to watch the replay, I actually gave out this particular short URL via the chat earlier so that you can actually get a link where you can view my entire deck and the video that will come out after today's discussion from this topic. We're going to be focusing on how you can boost the resilience of your digital products to persevere through the COVID-19 recovery. And we're going to focus specifically on digital product strategy. So what we're discussing is, why is it so crucial for your strategy to be, and your organization to be able to quickly adapt, be agile, and quick in implementing and making decisions, be decisive once you prioritize, move towards delivering something to very quickly test in the market. Very similar to Ryan's approach, you can actually use an agile approach even in designing your strategy, but then also ensure that your strategy, in order for it to be actionable, you also have already thought about success metrics, how to measure success before you go into implementation. And we're going to talk about 10 ways that COVID-19 can impact any product. And in this case, we're going to focus on impact to digital products. And we're also going to be discussing 7 ways to boost product resilience. And we're going to define what product resilience means. And we're going to have a Q&A also. And then also there will be, after, in the back end, after we're done with today's discussion, there's going to be an Ask Me Anything topic. And I'll be announcing how you can get into that private meeting room so that you can ask me any questions regarding today's topic if you want to get deeper into any of this. So before I get started, I actually want to send out this via the chat. How have you been personally impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic? I sent it out via chat earlier. If you can just tell me, are you currently unemployed as a result? Are you underemployed? There's been no impact to your job function, or now you're 100% teleworking, or are you now overwhelmed with work because there's so much demand for your product that you're overwhelmed with work? Or maybe there's a few other things that you end up with being overwhelmed with work. Pick the favorite, whatever applies to you, and let's share via the chat. And Ripa, I'm not looking at the chat, but I don't know if you can monitor people's response, but let's talk about, because in previous discussion, as I look at this, I'm seeing a spectrum regardless of what type of product you're in, whether you have a product that is purely software or a product that is IoT, meaning you have some sort of widget along with a mobile app or apps, and then cloud-based backend applications and portals. That's a complete IoT solution. I'm seeing, depending on the type of business model you have, you can be on an extreme sides of this, even if you have a digital product. So let's move on. Current situation is that today in digital applications, mobile applications have been the ones that have been gaining a lot of adoption. And recently published, this quarter of 2020 is a record for the amount of mobile app downloads into anybody's mobile devices. It surged by 52% compared to previous 3-year average. Not just last year, but a 3-year average a surge of 52%, and we are talking petabytes of downloads across the world. This is worldwide adoption of mobile apps. So if you are into digital products and your digital product entails mobile applications, this may be a good time for you, right? So let's talk about, are you really thriving in this current economy if indeed your digital product has a set of mobile applications? Let's look deeper. Here's another sample. These are the top applications worldwide that have been downloaded as of end of March of this year. And you can see that all the ones that you have heard about, regardless of the category, these are all mobile apps that have been mostly downloaded by anyone in the first quarter of 2020. Part of the reason why that 52% in increase in downloads in adoption, that amounts to hundreds of petabytes of information being downloaded around the world for any of these mobile applications. And what you see here is the top 10 on the overall downloads, but also then the positioning for the App Store, which is the iOS, and then Google, which is the Android device. Be able to look at the positioning of those things regardless of what type of application you have. So you see the ones that are surging are things like Zoom, WhatsApp, TikTok, Facebook, and all of these are the ones that have been contributing to this surge in adoption, right? So if you're a social media app, maybe that's good, because a lot of these ones that I'm showing here are social media apps, not the things that you think we would be needing, like food delivery or some other thing that is emerging right now because of COVID-19. So let's look deeper more. And before I do that, I wanted to hear your perspective regarding this. How has demand for your product been impacted? So if you have a digital product, or even if you have a non-digital product, whatever your product is, how has COVID-19 impacted your product? Are you seeing a significant drop in demand? Are you seeing somewhat reduced demand compared to the last 3 years? Are you seeing the same demand as before? Are you seeing more demand? Or are you seeing overwhelming demand for your product? And regardless of which side of the spectrum you're at, the ones that are going to be always a challenge for you as a vendor is, number one, when you have significant drop in demand, because that's not necessarily a good situation. But just as bad, often, especially when your business is not really to scale, overwhelming demand can also be, even though it's completely opposite, it would have the same impact on your business, which is you're not able to keep up with demand and you have an inconsistent experience. And that means that you're going to have a hard time managing and improving the customer experience, even though you have a lot of demand. So the good news is you have a lot of demand, but the bad news is you're not going to be, that may not necessarily be long-term if you don't improve or manage the customer experience. So here's what McKinsey published at the end of March. This is the impact to the US economy based on real GDP. And I want to find out, first of all, if you have a digital product, you're probably on the right-hand side of this because you're either a technology company or some sort of high-tech company, which is on the right-hand side of this diagram. And it shows that the impact to high-tech and retail and a few other sectors that are part of that is lower than other sectors that are now being impacted at depression level. This is Great Depression level, like back in the 1930s kind of thing, 20th century, for things like airlines, oil and gas, travel, insurance, and banks, which is financial services. These are the industries that, according to McKinsey on the survey they did, and this is just for the US market, they're impacted at depression levels, where the ones that are not significantly somewhat impacted, but not that much, are more like recession level, right? And recession level includes any technology company, including software publishers like mobile application vendors and others. So does that mean that because you're a mobile app provider or publisher, that you're right now thriving? Not necessarily. Let's talk about what this really means, right? And it has to do with the question that I asked. That is, where is demand coming from? And who are you depending or are you selling into, even if you are a B2B market that may be now stuck with being hit with depression level type of economy, loss on productivity at depression level. So the industries on the left are going to take longer to recover than the industries on the right-hand side, even though these are all industries, US companies, industries in US. This is the McKinsey report. McKinsey report also saying is that the depth of disruption, the length of disruption, and the shape of recovery are all what everybody's trying to figure out, because everybody's trying to figure out, have we hit bottom? Pretty much right now, trying to reopen the US economy. We think that we have hit bottom, but we will find out at the end of this week, because the stock markets just reopened on Tuesday of this week. So we'll find out what happened to the S&P indices based on that. Have we hit bottom, right? We don't really know. We just know that right now we're at what is most likely going to be a lasting recession, a recession that will last, that is even deeper than the last one we had back in 2007. So is that good news for you? I think it just depends on your product. So here's my other question. Given the current situation, which is what McKinsey said and published just recently, and this, by the way, I'm going to share where this information is because McKinsey made this publicly available, and I'm going to show you how to get it. So number 3, who is leading digital transformation within your organization today? If you're a digital company, you may already have a digital strategy and you're purely digital already. You were born digital and now you're trying to incentivize others to adopt a digital, right? Who really leads digital adoption? Well, in some of the industries that have been heavily impacted today, it's not the chief data officer, it's not the chief technology officer or the chief information officer or the chief executive officer. And mind you, up until the end of 2019, reportedly, multiple surveys that were done by all the different consulting firms, including McKinsey, Bain, and Boston Consulting Group, stated that roughly 70% of companies across industries, all US industries, reported either already having started digital transformation or many things that are still underway, still in progress, like some progress being made, but still under construction kind of thing, right? COVID-19 has been a wake-up call for these industries, because the ones that you had saw on the earlier chart that were on the left are the ones that are heaviest, that have been hit heaviest, and there was basically been the laggards in adopting anything digital, even though there's lots of digital products. So even though you might have a product, you may have an assortment of things and there's not enough adoption. If you're in that space, even a small decline in demand is not necessarily good, because you're already not a leader and you may be impacted depending on who are you selling into. Another thing that we talk about, if you want to actually increase the resilience of your product, you need to focus on understanding that you need to not just optimize, which is exploit. The right-hand side of this is optimization of Horizon 1 type of digital products. Your roadmap, Horizon 2, Horizon 3, needs to be about exploration. And what any experts are saying today is that today's winners, the ones that are going to actually be able to scale, persevere through the current crisis, and as they start seeing the turn coming, accelerate to scale back to where they were before, they need to not only be optimizing, but also exploring, which connects back to the same diagram that I pointed out earlier on the McKinsey report. The industries that are on the left have, for the most part, been doing nothing but exploitation, optimization. Very little exploration, because exploration to them is to actually start digitizing their entire business, not just certain aspects of their business. And even though they reported that they were 70% of all those companies of different across industries in US had started like 5-7 years ago, COVID-19 showed that most of them didn't do enough digitization of their business because everybody was optimizing and not also exploring. And that was part of the issue. And what I'm talking about here, the 3 horizons of growth, it's a framework that was actually introduced by McKinsey. And it's been around since, I would say, forever, 25 years or more. And this is where, if you are a product manager, you're mostly assigned to Horizon 1 products. And that means you're optimizing not just for revenue, you should be optimizing for profit as well. And that there's at least some teams that are at the same time that somebody is maintaining Horizon 1, that's where your revenue and profit are coming from. For Horizon 2, Horizon 3, you need to start exploring for growth and for learning. And the struggle for most organizations is that they mostly focus on just Horizon 1 and don't do enough on Horizons 2 nor 3. And that's the issue. If you want to be a resilient company, a resilient organization, your entire product portfolio has to have some components that are Horizon 1, some components that are Horizon 2, and some components that are Horizon 3 in order for your strategy to be resilient. So let's take a look at 10 different ways that COVID-19 can impact anybody's product. And this is actually a list that I started putting together, and actually was published recently by Gartner, the marketing firm, the research firm, and they published this list recently. And I agree with most of them. I think they actually are missing a few, but I think 10 is enough to begin with. If I listed more than 10, probably you guys would just doze off. So here's the top 10 according to Gartner, and we can discuss this further during the Ask Me Anything if you want. So number 1, you could have delayed or lost sales, right? This is where you have already declining demand, because demand is lost sales for some time. Cancellations, returns, that's also lost sales. Changing customer needs and priorities. That means that now whatever the buy behavior was before COVID-19, now is going to be different, radically different from before. And you need to do some rethinking as to how are you going to continue selling and reposition your product if you want to get back up to the sales that you were achieving based on those changing buyer behavior. Changing dynamics on customer interactions, meaning maybe the place is now different, meaning now they're adopting new mobile applications that they never had before. And if you don't have ways to sell to those customers through those applications, that may be a problem. Disrupted product launches, delayed product milestones, because anything that was in new product development, not yet in market, probably has been paused, put on hold, or killed. Reduced team capacity, because now you may have had to lay off, and now you have the same amount of work or more work, less people to actually execute. New remote collaboration requirements, because now everybody's teleworking, when before your stand-ups were in person, right? Even if you have Scrum or Agile or Safe, you're used to having a war room that is physical, and now all of those things, you've now have gone virtual. Disruption in your supply chain, as well as anything that has to do with changing of your competition, your competitors. Any of these can be disruptive to anybody's product. And in your strategy, if you want to overcome, you need to make sure that you're resilient to any of these things that may be coming, because it's not necessarily one, it may be multiple of these 10 or 12 things that you're experiencing right now in your product today. And somehow in how you reshape your strategy as to what you're going to do to actually persevere and then thrive afterwards, you need to make sure that that's included in your strategy. Very similar to what Ryan was referring to earlier. You have to have the right components to your strategy, and also make sure you have the right metrics to monitor performance, because you will need new metrics. If you maintain your current KPIs, you're going to miss something guaranteed, because this is a significant radical change to your current strategy if you're being impacted by a combination of these 10 things that I discussed earlier. Here's the impact. Ride sharing. How many of you, if I was looking at you, how many of you have both Uber and Lyft in your whatever mobile device you have, right? And I have both, and I actually travel the world and I use both around the world. Actually, Lyft is now emerging faster. It's available in North America today. It's actually US, not yet available outside, but Uber is global, and Uber has multiple competitors across markets, right? So even though Uber was first mover, they had the first mover advantage. Now it's a very crowded market, as you can see, because this is worldwide ride-sharing applications. And you see that in US, you see both Uber and Lyft, but when you have leadership somewhere else outside of US, it's Uber and somebody else, not Lyft, right? This is what you're seeing. And is anybody using any ride-sharing services right now? What do you think is happening to Uber and Lyft here in US? They are shrinking, they're imploding because they're seeing depression level, even though they're a mobile application, right? A digital product, a great digital product that works, is very usable, has the right experience. And because of a radical change in buyer behavior, all of these companies are suffering, not just in US, worldwide. What do you do? What's the future for these type of companies? You need to change completely different strategy, because this is about survival first, then figuring out how to scale back to the next normal. 7 ways to boost your product resilience. I'm going to talk about all of these together because there's a more detailed discussion on this that is longer. I'm not going to get into all the details. I'm just going to get into the number 1 step, and that is resolve immediate business continuity issues. And that means, number 1, you do that, and then before you can go on to the next steps. And the final step is also very important, because if you're in that type of business that you have been lagging at adopting digital transformation or anything that has to do with digitizing your entire business model, you need to start doing both business continuity at the same time that now you're also figuring out how to accelerate digital transformation efforts that you were just going at a snail's pace. Because the only way you're going to be able to scale back to a next normal, if you're going to thrive, is to actually accelerate digitization of your business model. And here's the reasons why number 1 is so important. Resolving business continuity is about that even though you may have a great growth engine, meaning you have a great people and processes and the product portfolio, everything is great, and you're a profitable company today, when you have a drop in demand and there's going to be long-term, and you have significant cost structures that you cannot shed overnight, cash flow fuels your growth engine. So you might have a great growth engine, no fuel. You're not going to go very far once you've run out of fuel. Cash flow is fuel for any business, and that's what business continuity is. That's the number 1 priority for any small or mid-market company today, is figuring out how to actually get funding so that you can actually survive long enough so that you can then scale back to the next normal. And part of that is creating your strategy. You've got to assess your current situation. What I find out is most product managers don't do enough of this. The 5C analysis has been around for some time, and the 5C analysis allows you to really put context to the problem that you're solving before you start putting together your strategy and the components of strategy that is about executing the strategy. And for the lack of not doing this, you don't have enough context, and you're just making too many assumptions. And those assumptions are errors in omissions that you might have a great ability to design a great strategy, and you might have a great way to execute that strategy, but it's going to be the wrong strategy to execute if you don't have the right context. You've got to do this, and that means you have to have the 5 components along with Porter's 5 forces models. You use both to start coming up with what is the current climate and for how long? Is there a perfect storm coming, and is there a series of perfect storms instead of just one? Is it more than one tsunami coming? Is there more than one earthquake, or is there going to be a lot of aftershocks in the economy that you need to make sure that you're locking down and you're estimating what you need to actually persevere, then scale back? Competition. What's happening with competitors? And how has the situation changed significantly? Customers, buyer behavior. your company strengths and weaknesses and business model, and collaborators, both on the supply side as well as on distribution channels. You need to have lots of collaborators identified to figure out how to maintain the perceived value and maintain the unique value proposition that can get you to at least remain at the positive in cash flow, so that at some point when you start scaling, you can scale in a profitable way. Positive cash flow is what you must do first. Now, when it comes to business model and the business model canvas, very similar to the Venn diagram that Ryan showed earlier, which is part of any human-centered design or even design thinking. You've got to start thinking about your business model, your business model for your product in three components. Desirability is the front stage, anything that is customer facing, and how do you manage that to be able to manage the consistency of your offering, and the delivery of your offering, but also manage the customer experience in a consistent manner. All those things are about revenue. You've got to do that right. The backstage is the stuff that the customers don't see, but it's very critical, especially when you rely on lots of different suppliers or partners or any of those people that are helping you create what and build the value proposition that you're selling in the market. And then finally, viability has to do with not just revenue, meaning revenue streams and cost structure. It is profitability, and profitability means that you're working on implementing new revenue streams and increasing revenue streams for the same product over time, at the same time that you're cost reducing your cost structure, and everything from CapEx to OpEx, and OpEx from being fixed costs to variable costs, and turning variable costs to fixed costs, so that you can scale very quickly without having to increase a lot of your cost structure. These are all things that you've got to do, and all three of these means that you have to treat in your strategy. Digitizing your business means that you have to figure out, how do you digitize your front stage? How do you digitize the backstage? And how do you maintain the profitability? And how do you benchmark profitability to your closest competitors, market by market? Accelerating, once you get to this point, you're going to start accelerating. And digitizing your business is about what you need to accelerate, especially if you're in an environment where you're a late adopter. And that means that there are multiple steps that should be done as part of your strategy, because this is business transformation of digital initiatives. Digitization of those three components I spoke earlier in your business is what this is all about. And it's going to be part of your strategy from the very beginning, because it will take resources, time, and funding to execute as well. And once you design your strategy, you can make sure that you have the right metrics and agree as to what is success, because you're not expecting to be 100% across everything, because you may be setting your bars too low, and you need to have not just achievable goals, but also far-reaching goals, audacious goals, a combination of those things in order for you to be able to persevere and then thrive after recovery begins. And the balanced scorecard is one of these tools that you can use very quickly in an agile approach. As you're designing your strategy, the people putting it together are also looking as to how are you going to measure success across critical components like financial pieces, customers that you're wanting to retain versus acquire, processes that you now have to improve or eliminate or continue and doing more of in order for you to thrive, and also learning and growth of your people, not just domain expertise, but other things in being able to adopt methods, processes, tools to actually help you work smarter, not harder, right? This is what it's all about. And once you design and deploy the changes, then you can then accelerate, because you can have a 90-day approach, and you can do this in a agile way. No different than what Ryan was stating to us, what he did for USAA. That's exactly what you need to do what you need to accelerate. You can actually do this using the same product development processes that you're doing, but this is about execution of digital transformation initiatives within the company. And here's an example of some companies that have, took advantage of this. Enterprise, right? Enterprise was came in after Hertz and Avis were number one, number two, and they were already, both companies had already deployed. Enterprise came in with a very unique value proposition and grew quicker in North America compared to Hertz and Avis. Who's number one today in revenue and profitability? Enterprise Holdings. As a matter of fact, Enterprise has now acquired over time some of its competitors, Alamo and National, and all they've done is came up with a new brand, same product as Hertz and Avis, a different target than Hertz and Avis. When I talk to people about this, Hertz and Avis are targeting business travelers for the most part. That's why you find them at airports and then hotels for the most part. Enterprise went after a completely different segment in the same markets where Hertz and Avis operated. And because those customers rent for longer and they need a rental vehicle for a few weeks, their business model has not just revenue advantage, lower cost structures. Their entire business model, Enterprise's business model, is more profitable than any of its competitors. And this is why they've grown faster than Hertz and Avis. And they are number one today in North America, simply because of the strength of their business model. So the moral of the story is, if you want to persevere, you want to make sure that you have the best business model compared to your direct competitors in the same market. Here's an example of food delivery apps. I mentioned, food delivery apps, and many of you may have downloaded recently because of COVID-19, probably all the top four of these, right? The top four today in US are DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, and Postmates. Domino's is number four, but Domino's is only for Domino's, right? I'm talking about these are food delivery apps for multiple brands, not just one type of product or one brand. Domino's is number one because they've invested a lot in digitizing their entire business. And this is why they're number four as pizza. And that's all they do. Pizza and whatever sides and other things that go along with pizza, right? But DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, and Postmates, these are basically, you can sign up as a vendor, as a restaurant, and now add the ability for anyone to actually order through any of these applications, right? So you can look for any kind of restaurant or any kind of food near you with any of these apps. And these are actually right now emerging, right? Part of that 52% increase in downloads and also more revenue coming to those apps are food delivery apps. And it's not just in US. This is a worldwide phenomenon. This is, we can talk about these use cases because these are all digital products. And we can talk more in detail, but I have some announcements. I'm actually in the DC metro area, and I was more than glad when Austin went virtual because I had been wanting to talk at Austin, and I'm really grateful for all your organizers. But I'm going to be talking at ProductTank here in Northern Virginia. It's also a virtual meetup, which you can sign up for. It's coming up next Tuesday. I'm going to be discussing the path to valuable products and deeper into these 7 steps that I spoke about. So if you want to get more detail about that, because this is an entire hour-long presentation, I was able to just kind of give you a summary, and we can get into more details if you attend this particular one. It's free to attend because it's a virtual meetup, just like the ProductTank Austin. There's another meetup, which is the Business Intelligentsia coming up next Thursday, also a virtual meetup. This is one that I'm actually going to be a panelist talking about why COVID-19 is accelerating the adoption of digital transformation and augmented analytics, which is also a set of digital products that is emerging in adoption. Here's a course that I'm teaching coming up in June for information on that. And here's the information as to how you can join the private chat room at the end of today's discussion. If you're willing to stay for a few more minutes, have any questions, we can get deeper into some of these details. Here's the short URL you can use to actually join. It's a Zoom meeting. So all you have to do is click through, register, and join. And I'll be announcing at the end of today's discussion what time that will be. And here's my contact information. And I am done, Ripa. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We can defer questions for the end. So that's okay.
Perfect. They're actually in questions chat. So if you'd like to type it up, feel free to. Thank you, Hector, so much.